Cannapreneur Partners presents Cannabis and Investing with your host, Richard Wilson, along with founder and CEO, Michael Scott, co-CEO, Todd Sullivan, and original shark from Shark Tank, Kevin Harrington.
Welcome everybody to this Cannabis Investing Roundtable. I'm here with a few of my friends here today. We're going to talk about what's going on in the cannabis space, investment trends, why to potentially consider investing now in the space versus later. We're going to talk about statistics, personal stories of why these professionals are involved in the space, and I just want to make a quick introductions of each of them. So first of all, we have Michael Scott here today, who's the founder of Cannapreneur. He has a background as one of the top 1% wealth advisors at Ameriprise, which is one of the reasons why I got involved with Cannapreneur. Most people in new, hot, fast-growing spaces are 22 years old, don't have professional experience, don't have a track record. Michael stood out at our investor events as someone who really had that credibility and background, and that made a big difference in me getting involved. We also have with us here Todd Sullivan, who's the co-CEO of Cannapreneur. He also runs a website called Value Play, and he's a serial entrepreneur, and he's going to be informing us on some of the statistics and background and research and why he got into the space. And then probably our most well-known person here is Kevin Harrington, one of the original sharks from Shark Tank. He's done over $1 billion in revenue in the companies that he owns and has partnered with and grown. And he's going to also be adding some light on why he got involved here and how his personal life kind of intersects, nicely with the cannabis CBD space. So welcome everybody. We're going to be going over a lot of different details very quickly and try to keep this nice and concise for you here today. So first of all, Michael, I want to ask you about why you got involved with cannabis. You are a successful wealth advisor, could have spent your whole career just in that space. What about your personal background really got you turned on to CBD and the cannabis space?
Happy to get into that, Richard. But for starters, thanks for joining us here today. You're certainly a thought leader in your world in the family office space, so we're appreciative to have you here.
Sure, thank you.
In terms of what got me jumping into this is I just saw back in 2016 that this was going to be an absolute entrepreneurial explosion. So I saw the opportunity both from an early stage entrepreneurial perspective, but a lot of my life for the better part of 2 decades has been dealing with investors more so in the public market space, but certainly helping grow wealth through investments. And I saw this as really a sector that was going to heat up pretty quickly. In fact, in the last 2-3 years, I would tell you that my conversations with investors, I have seen that there's an insatiable demand and appetite for the cannabis sector. In fact, in the better part of 2 decades, I've only seen this type of interest and demand one other time, and that was when the late 90s when we were really seeing the internet boom.
Right. Yeah, I think a lot of investors not only want to feel smart, but actually be smart and not completely miss the boat on things. And we saw with the recent pandemic, if you blinked when the stock market went down, you missed the recovery on that. Is one good example of that. A lot of people also don't get a chance sometimes to see tangible growth, something like blockchain or crypto, whether you like the space or not, grew very quickly, but people were so skeptical of it and couldn't see in the real world. It wasn't something they could see or touch. A lot of people felt like they missed out on that boat as well. Yeah. Kevin, in your case, you're in great shape. We've known each other, for a couple of years now. I know you're, in your 50s or 60s now. Can you talk about how you got kind of turned on to the space?
Yeah, so thank you, Richard. And I'm actually in my 60s, but when I hit 50, I think I'm an old entrepreneur now, okay? So I used to be a young entrepreneur, but I've been following trends in industries, and I'm in various industries. But when I hit 50, I decided I was gonna stop drinking. And so that was a great move for me, and gave me more focus and mental clarity in the process. But as I got a few years older and now in the 60s, I play a lot of golf, and I've got arthritis and I've got bursitis, and so I started exploring the CBD and cannabis space, and it has been transformational for me from a pain standpoint. So now this is all prior to being an investor. So knew that the industry was growing, and then when I met Michael and Todd, I said I want to get involved with Cannapreneur as an investor and brand ambassador, and so we've had some really powerful things happening in the company now.
Right. Yeah, and it seems like there's 3, we'll get into this in a couple minutes, but it seems like there's 3 big categories in cannabis that the public knows about, which would be, recreational use, medical use, but then there's this whole line of CBD products that is not prescription much of the time, but really is more broad use and used by all different types of demographics, not just the traditional recreational use. And I know, Todd, when you first got in touch with Michael, and I think we met in Miami at one of the Family Office Club live events, and you talked about the statistics and the research and gateway versus exit way use of the drug. Can you talk a little bit about some of those numbers?
Yeah, I've always been a highly data motivated guy when it comes to my investing life. And when I first looked at the space 4 or 5 years ago, I saw this amazing potential of this national market just kind of bubbling up from the local state level. But I had a lot of questions. You always heard these things about cannabis. I had what was called like a yeah but list. It's a great investment. But more kids are going to have it if it's legal. Yeah, but it's a gateway drug. And as I dug through the data, I realized that just about everything we believe about this plan is wrong. I mean, it's when you legalize cannabis in your state, opioid deaths fall, alcohol sales fall, prescriptions written for things like anxiety, pain, sleep disorders, they all fall virtually immediately. So as I looked at the data, I said, when public perception finally matches what we're actually seeing on the data, the investment in this space is going to just mushroom. It's going to be immense. And that's when I decided to get in. I walked into Cannapreneur, looked at Mike, said I want to be involved in this space as an investor, and 3 or 4 months later ended up joining the team. So
I think it was a social media blip that he had picked up on and just came right into the office. But I'll just comment on that. I think of both Kevin and Todd as smart and savvy, both from an entrepreneurial perspective, but also forward-thinking investor perspective, right? So there's the cannabis industry and kind of the stigma that it was kind of really been riddled with in the early days. That stigma is evaporating at a very, very fast pace. And it's really forward-thinking strategic investors like Todd and Kevin that are a lot of the early adopters in terms of placing capital because they see where the puck is headed. This is an industry that touches both, things from an adult use recreation perspective like the alcohol industry does, medical, but it also the nutraceutical industry as you were talking about earlier. So very dynamic.
3 factors have come together to create a perfect storm for investors interested in cannabis. First, the federal status of the plant inhibits banks, Wall Street, and PE firms from investing in cannabis. Second, this has led to a severe shortage of funding for the industry, giving today's investors a significant advantage. Finally, the ever-increasing trend towards legalization means that additional states will continue to create emerging markets, and as such, new investments for opportunistic investors. Now is the time for private investors to seriously consider cannabis, and Cannapreneur Partners is the company to invest with. Contact us now to seize your opportunity. Thank you.
Todd, you first started as an investor in Cannapreneur and then started helping out a bit more and then said, hey, why don't I just come in as co-CEO because I like being here, obviously.
Right? What better way to watch your investment than be involved, right? It was a no-brainer. And I just, you spend 10 minutes around Michael listening to him talk about cannabis and you instantly realize that this is not a business, this is a passion, right? This is something he's looking to change society for the better with the use of this plant and bringing it to more people. And that's kind of an infectious attitude, and you just realize that as an entrepreneur, and Kevin, I mean, when you feel passionately about something, you're just not going to fail. It's not going to be an option.
Richard, one of the things, as an investor and shark, I look at industries that have growth potential, and I think one of the beautiful things about cannabis is there's the plant side and dispensaries and medical and transformations there, but there's also the entire business side of cannabis, software and real estate and artificial intelligence and products and things like this. So the company Cannapreneur is investing in various of these different kind of industries that touch this world and it's very powerful.
Right, yeah, and I think, Todd, people can relate to wanting to have, some insight or control over your own investments, family office investors, ultra-wealthy investors specifically. But also one thing that we've tried to do at Family Office Club, which I see Cannapreneur doing that I really like, is that you guys have a platform, you provide education, insights, thought leadership, and you see hundreds and hundreds of deals per quarter, and you don't have to invest in 50 things, you don't have to invest in anything. But if you find something that you think is 1 out of 500, 1 out of 2,000 best deal flow, then you can dig into that. And if you can negotiate best in class terms and get a great deal for you and your investors and your balance sheet, then you pull the trigger. And I think family offices can relate to that as well. It's totally different than going to a company that says, hey, we have this one cultivation site or one dispensary. And it's the only thing you have to talk to them about. It's the only thing you have to pitch. It's the only thing you have to focus on. You guys can be looking at hundreds and thousands of deals to pick it. What are the numbers like in terms of the number of deals that you guys are seeing on a monthly basis right now?
We see pretty high volume. In fact, it was almost overwhelming when we first kind of came to the scene and kind of stoked the flames to get that. We were seeing 40, 50 plus deals on a weekly basis. It in fact got so bad, people would be stalking me, finding me on social media. I mean, I'll tell you why. It's not that, that there's anything that special about me per se, Richard. It's just that in the cannabis game, if you're an early stage entrepreneur, you're not going to the banks and getting an SBA loan.
Right.
You're not going to 98% of private equity or venture funds out there. Those outlets are just not available. So now you mix the drive and the allure of the green gold rush, right? Because make no mistake, millionaires and billionaires are being created from this space, and the movie is playing out in states like Colorado, California, and Washington State, right? So you have that tenacious drive from early stage entrepreneurs, right? Great entrepreneurs, the 1%ers of the world, they're a force.
Right.
They can't get that capital, and then all of a sudden we put a shingle out, right? Now just think about the landscape. We got into this almost 4 years ago, Richard. We were very, very early stage. Today, 4 years later, there's still less than 70 adult use dispensaries along the entire East Coast. Colorado has thousands of dispensaries, over 500 adult use, just Colorado. California has thousands. Folks, this is coming to the East Coast. Make no mistake. And so here's what we're seeing at the ground level. These entrepreneurs are ready to open up their medical or adult use dispensary. They need that million and a half.
Right.
The answer is no from your typical bank. Friends and family, the smaller check writers right now with the pandemic going on, people are holding on to their cash. Right. And so what this does though, it creates an amazing opportunity for Cannapreneur partners and the investors that are watching that join and invest alongside, because of this difficulty in landing this investment capital.
Right. So I guess along with seeing hundreds of deals, you're seeing different types of deals, different stages of maturity, different quality of CEOs, different terms you can negotiate. And I think family offices miss that in the first 2 years of becoming ultra wealthy, but also just investors in general don't realize when you look at 4 deals a year, what are the chances that one's going to be amazing, excellent? You have no leverage in negotiation because if you say no to that deal, you might not invest in anything for the year. And I think that transitioning from that to the talk about dispensaries, there's all different types of deals you guys could be doing, but you see dispensaries as a defensive play for changes to come, and you see it as your favorite place to be allocating right now. Can you talk a little bit to why, Todd?
Yeah, so it's funny that what you said about investing is like Warren Buffett's favorite quote about the fat pitch. As an investor, you can watch pitches go by all day and you never get called out on strikes, but you wait for that one fat pitch and you swing for the fences on it, right? That's what Warren says. So that's how we view dispensaries. We view federal legalization as a real wild card, right? We don't know if it's going to happen next year, 2 years, or 3 years. But when it does, the price that you're paying on the East Coast for cannabis, once we can bring it across state lines, is probably going to collapse, right? So investing $15 to $20 million in a cultivation at those price points we think is risky. If you own a dispensary, you can probably open 5 to 7 dispensaries for the same cost as one cultivation. If federal legalization comes and your input prices collapse, well, that's great for your business, right? So we view it as the less risky of the two, with the big wild card of federal legalization. What's going to happen? If it happens, we think dispensaries do better than they do now, which is really good, and we're concerned about cultivation. So that's why we like that space.
Dispensaries present a low-risk, high-return opportunity versus cultivation. For the expense of starting a medium-sized cultivation enterprise, we can open 7 to 9 dispensaries. Dispensaries present far less risk in terms of investment versus cultivation once federal legalization happens. Currently, THC cannot cross state lines. Once cannabis is federally legal, a race to the lowest cost producer will ensue. While this will be a huge benefit for the dispensary model, we think it contains significant risk for many cultivations. Now is the time to invest in the dispensary model and secure locations ahead of federal legalization. Contact Cannapreneur for more information.
one of the cool things, Richard, about the cannabis industry, because it's coming up in all these pockets, right? So what we go years back, it was less than half of the states that have legal laws were actually legal, right? 15, 16. Now we're at 33, 34 plus states. We're pressing on, I think, 8 or 9 different international countries now forming legalization. But here's the thing that's unique, and here's what we capitalize on the space. We can see how the movie's played out in Colorado. We can watch how the movie played out in California, Washington State, and we can see, okay, the same entrepreneurial demand at the ground level was there, the same upside opportunity was there, but the game played out a little different because of the regulations. So what we can do is we can take that, understand how the regulations are playing out here on the East Coast, and make very strategic bets on where the puck is going to be headed from a private investment sector. And that's what we do in this sector.
Okay. And Kevin, so you've been involved with $1 billion plus in revenue. I think you've recorded a couple thousand videos with the different companies you've been involved with and helped them really scale their operations. Why is it that you're taking your time to invest, in Cannapreneur and partner with Cannapreneur and looking at cannabis deal flow? What gets you excited about that?
So when I first got involved in the as seen in TV infomercial space, actually one of the pioneers of that industry and created the original kind of modern day infomercials. But in the beginning, when we started, I met Tony Little, and he was the fitness guru, right? And so we didn't know if fitness would work. So we started investing a little bit into some of his things, and boom, it took off. And so we were the early investors in fitness, and we did billions of dollars actually over time just in the fitness space alone. So and that was the beginning of that space. Then we got into the houseware space, the hardware space, and so I like being in on the ground floor. And when I go back and think about things, I spoke at a conference a few years ago at a cannabis conference in Denver, and I saw a lot of excitement, but the industry was just getting started. Now the industry is really at a point where people need to get in because it's going to go to the next level from here. Right.
And I want to point out that it's smart to trust the CEO who has experience and track record. It's very hard for a savvy investor to find someone who has much of a track record in this space. So you really have to look at what they did before cannabis was legalized.
Absolutely.
Assuming you don't want to work.
It's a really good point, Richard, because if you're on the East Coast and you're looking for track record of success specifically in cannabis, it's devilishly difficult to find because 98% of the deal flow we see is actually pre-revenue, right? I mean, look, the East Coast is just now opening up. We're just flipping into the second inning of the game. But the good news is, the entrepreneur in me, I freaking love early stage, right? I just heard Kevin say he likes early stage. That's the entrepreneur in us. However, in that early stage, please understand as an investor, you're also at the highest risk stage, right? A small percentage of the earliest stage businesses will be successful. So the way we do it is we sink our money in first. 9 out of 10 times we put our money where our mouth is, we will find that opportunity, we will vet the heck out of the opportunity, the regulations, the entrepreneur, the track record of success, get that investment to a stage where a fair amount of that early stage risk is actually evaporated on. Have it packaged up and then bring the investors in. And it's a much easier conversation when we're saying, hey, we're recommending this not just because we're getting because there's a fat commission because there isn't one, or a fee, there isn't one. We're recommending this because we put our money where our mouth is, our money's already in, and we believe us partnering with you as an investor and also with the entrepreneur, that dynamic coming together, we're gonna all win by creating an amazing investment opportunity.
Right. So I think it's important to define a couple of things. One is you guys don't run a cannabis fund. It's not like you write a check and you get distributed into 20 different deals. You get to look at things deal by deal. So if you don't like anything but medical, you can look at that. If you don't like anything but recreational or Massachusetts, you can be very specific on that. But also, you are not forced to make a whole bunch of different investments. So you're really choosing the best of the best and bringing just that to the investor and saying, hey, is this a yes or no for you? And that's a different model. And it's also, if anyone wants to allocate to the space, likely the hundreds and hundreds of deals you guys see per quarter is going to compete very well with whatever random deal they got from their brother-in-law or their old college roommate or cousin or whatever.
When I walked in, that was a key thing for me when I invested this. I was like, wait a minute. So I'm going to invest in this company. I'm going to get a piece of everything you've already got, but then I'm able to say, I just want to focus on debt lending or dispensary operations. I'm able to tailor my investment in CP to the areas I want. And there was nothing else out there that did that, and
Right.
that was, for me, as someone who's invested my whole life, that was a huge advantage.
Yeah, and I just want to speak to that for just a minute. Todd is a great example of that very, very early stage investor. But what I foresee, and a lot of this is driven by the media, the headlines, the updates and the regulations, there's going to be droves and droves of investors that come into this sector in the East Coast. My advice for investors is think about the timing. You know, if you wait for federal legalization, arguably it's too late, right? Because now big tobacco, big pharma, Wall Street money, their money will be in. You want to be in before that so that your shares and your valuations are turbocharged by those dollars. That's what you want to do. Todd saw the writing on the wall very, very early on. He came into my office, I kid you not, didn't have an appointment. This guy sees us on LinkedIn, knocks on our door. Hey, I think what you guys are doing is really, really cool. I want to invest. I'm like, okay. We sit down, have a quick dialogue, talk a few times, but Todd is a great example of what's to come. Mark my words, there's going to be hundreds of millions of dollars deployed in the East Coast because there is insatiable demand from the ground up. I'm just going to put it to you like this. How many times in history, Richard, in history, can we say that consumers, entrepreneurial operators, investors, all from the ground up are basically saying, we recognize that this is federally illegal. In the eyes of the federal government, this is an illegal thing, but we're going to go with state laws and we're going to invest anyway. There's not many times that we have seen that. You can think of it with prohibition, you know, with alcohol, but this is unique. This is more than just let's have fun and have access to this social thing. This is a medicine. This is something that's preventing and reducing the suicide rates with veterans and people that struggle with PTSD.
Currently, there is no national market for cannabis. That makes every state in which cannabis is legal its own market, and every newly legal state an emerging market. Wall Street, banks, and PE firms are inhibited from investing in the sector due to federal law, and this gives private investors a massive opportunity to get in on the ground floor. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to grasp what will happen to prices and the value of assets once universal legalization comes. Aside from the potential financial benefits of investing in cannabis, there are massive benefits for society. According to the CDC, when adult use cannabis is legalized in a state, prescription opioid and illicit deaths decline by 20%. Alcohol and related crimes decline, and prescriptions for pain, anxiety, PTSD, sleep disorders, and depression all decline. Simply put, people are able to substitute a plant for highly addictive prescription medications that come with unwanted side effects and get the same medicinal benefits. Now is the time to invest. Put Cannapreneur's expertise, experience, and infrastructure to work for you. Contact us for more information. Thank you.
Kevin, you have a very special skill set. I mean, most people can't claim, hey, I'm an inventor of the infomercial, or, you know, as seen on TV. Everybody knows that brand name. And so looking at the dispensary opportunity, there is no national brand right now. And I guess that's part of your motivation. And you had a gut feeling, as well as getting to know the team specifically, just about, hey, this is a kind of an open field. And I guess some of the raw material was there that you think is necessary to really build a national brand, right?
Yeah, I think that's, in the world of as seen on TV, we start with a test. We get it out there, and as we ramp up, we get exposure, we build these massive brands. Jack LaLanne and the Juicer, and Tony Little in fitness, and Billy Mays, and George Foreman, and many people that I've worked with and built these massive brands. This is exactly what we plan to do with Cannapreneur.
Right.
And from the deal flow perspective we talked about before, you know, every product says, you know, can you help us sell our product, or can you help us bring us to market? Now we can just, I mean, if we can't do it, nobody can, right? I mean, if Kevin Harrington can't help you sell your product, there's fundamentally something wrong with your product, right? It's just not going to take off, you know, no matter what you try. So that's really good for us.
Absolutely, and I'll just speak to, with this green gold rush that's happening in the East Coast, it's much bigger than me. It's much bigger than what I'm going to be able to chew through. And so really it's about the team that you develop. I cannot be happier that we're aligned with Kevin, and Kevin is helping boost our brand here on the East Coast. I mean, everything about Kevin speaks early stage entrepreneurism, investing, which is what this is all about, and it certainly speaks to growing investments by multiples. So I'm pumped to have Kevin as part of the team. And I got to talk about Todd just a little bit as well, because not only did he write the fastest damn check when he came through our office, which I was like, wow.
Put his money where his mouth was,
but
right?
He started out with his own personal check. Within, I think it was 6 weeks, and I gotta tell you, I was blown away, because in cannabis, everybody talks a big game, Richard, but that talk boils down to like a 1%, right?
Right.
With Todd, he's come to my office, this unassuming dude. He's like, I'd like to write a check. My partner was like, hey, this guy just walked in our office, wants to write this check. Within 6 weeks, somewhere along that journey, I just said to Todd, you ought to, with your background, you ought to launch a syndicate and just, create a bigger velocity and a bigger check. And within 6 weeks, he raises $2 quick million, and then writes another giant check and becomes the largest single investor in Cannapreneur Partners. I just looked at him and said, wow, you really are all in on this, huh? Then over the course of November to January, it was amazing timing, because my co-founder, Michael Collette, his plan was to help get this thing launched, but then go back into his passion, which I supported. There was a void. And Todd, first of all, put his money where his mouth is with the checks, and then his contact base with the syndicate. But then he just starts helping out, and it starts with this talk about us doing a podcast together. And 3 months later, I'm like, dude, I think you should be co-CEO, and I have to tell you, it's really, really been great. So I'm pumped about the team that we're developing and building. There is more opportunity than we can possibly chew through. But if I can help build an amazing team that's focused on helping these early stage businesses rock, 10x their business, helping investors certainly win along the way. But then last and probably the most important, I see an amazing opportunity to create tons of jobs, give back to society, because this is a medicine that is extremely therapeutic. Minimize and help reduce the suicide rate. The stats are compelling, Richard. Across the board, when you look at legalization, it's 20 to 25% opioid overdose deaths are decreasing. That is staggering. It is dispelling the myth of cannabis being a gateway drug.
Right.
There are now Harvard professors and experts doing roadshows and talking about how cannabis is an amazing exit-way drug. And I do think that society's been essentially sold a bill of goods, and what I think is now, for the first time happening, is real data is getting out there. And I will submit to you in kind of the most simplistic, fundamental way. Elon Musk, one of my takeaways from him is boil things down to their most fundamental truths and make the decisions from there. Here's what I see in cannabis. If you boil it down to its most fundamental truths, as a medicine, it's undeniable. It is helpful across so many ailments with a small list of side effects. From an adult use recreational perspective, it's far less harmful than alcohol. Lots of wealth will be created because of those two fundamental truths in the sector.
3 factors have come together to create a perfect storm for investors interested in cannabis. First, the federal status of the plant inhibits banks, Wall Street, and PE firms from investing in cannabis. Second, this has led to a severe shortage of funding for the industry, giving today's investors a significant advantage. Finally, the ever-increasing trend towards legalization means that additional states will continue to create emerging markets, and as such, new investments for opportunistic investors. Now is the time for private investors to seriously consider cannabis, and Cannapreneur Partners is the company to invest with. Contact us now to seize your opportunity. Thank you.
Kevin, in your world of marketing and scaling companies quickly, you guys talk about MERs, you talk about CTAs, you talk about direct response. There's a whole universe of terms that a normal human being won't understand.
Exactly.
And Todd, you're a numbers guy because you used to run a hedge fund. So you guys talk about Sharpe ratios and alpha and producing alpha, et cetera. In this space, we've been talking about dispensaries, but I'm sure there's some people listening that say, well, I have no idea what a dispensary is. Is that like a distribution network and then it goes to retail? Is that where they grow the crops? So I would like you to define what a dispensary is, and also talk about, does it take $10 million to create one of these, and then it produces $1 million a year in revenue, or what do the numbers really look like?
Great question. So really, a dispensary in its simplest form is a retail distribution point for cannabis. It's like walking into a CVS or a liquor store and purchasing your cannabis. And a cultivation is the grow facility where it's grown. They could be 100 miles apart or 30 miles apart, but they're just basically big fields of indoor grown cannabis. So we like the dispensary space because no matter where you live, it's pretty much $1 million to $1.5 million to open a dispensary, whether you're in California, Colorado, or wherever. If you're on the East Coast, though, that dispensary averages about $15 to $18 million a year in sales.
Wow.
If you're in one of the other more established states in the US, you're talking 5 to 10 million a year. A really good one will do 10 million. So the East Coast opportunity for the same investment, you're talking multiples of return on the dispensary space here. And again, we like it because it's product driven. We're selling products through it. We're not beholden to input costs and federal legalization coming and changing the rules of which we're playing in. So
right.
That's pretty good. $1 million to $1.5 million to build the dispensary, but $15 to $18 million in sales annually.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so when we look at this from a raw investor perspective, right? So how often do you come into opportunities where you can deploy $1 million, $1.5 million to get the operation launched? That operation could be running within 6 to 12 months. The multiples on the East Coast that these things have been selling for is 1 to 2 times gross revenue. $15 to $20 million. That can be done within 24 to 36 months in some cases, right? So what I'll tell you is that is going to continue to happen on a state-by-state basis. When you look at the entire East Coast, once again, there's less than 70 adult use dispensaries. All of them, almost all of them, opened right in our backyard because Massachusetts was the first adult use legal state in the entire East Coast. That now theme is expanding all along the East Coast. And I will submit to you, Richard, that right here in Florida, we believe will be one of the largest cannabis markets worldwide. So for whether you're based out of Florida, California, Utah,
right.
If you're interested in getting involved in an early stage sector that will explode in the East Coast, we believe now is an amazing time. It can be confusing though, because you can look at the public markets and you can look at what happened on the Canadian Stock Exchange and think, this is the worst time to get into cannabis, right? COVID, etc. But let's take a look and in a nutshell, look at what happened there. There was such insatiable demand from the ground level for investors to get into cannabis. There was a tiny number of quality cannabis companies on the Canadian Stock Exchange. And I would say that tiny number, most of them had not even proven that they can create cash yet. Yet investors were dumping money, throwing money at them, driving the valuations way up. And it really didn't make sense because that revenue wasn't being produced yet, right?
Right.
We now are gonna see the same type of explosion. However, I think it's gonna be much greater as the federal status of the law starts to change here on the East Coast, because some of these large cannabis operators, they're already securing their ticker symbols behind the scenes. A lot of investors don't realize that the vast majority of the cannabis players are not on the US Stock Exchange, and 99% of investors are not going to find a way to invest through the Canadian Stock Exchange. So what that means is this publicly traded investment game in the US, it hasn't even started yet. But mark my words, folks, it's definitely coming.
Dispensaries present a low-risk, high-return opportunity versus cultivation. For the expense of starting a medium-sized cultivation enterprise, we can open 7 to 9 dispensaries. Dispensaries present far less risk in terms of investment versus cultivation once federal legalization happens. Currently, THC cannot cross state lines. Once cannabis is federally legal, a race to the lowest cost producer will ensue. While this will be a huge benefit for the dispensary model, we think it contains significant risk for many cultivations. Now is the time to invest in the dispensary model and secure locations ahead of federal legalization. Contact Cannapreneur for more information.
A lot of this comes down to timing for some investors who are kind of waiting to see what's happening in the space. But Todd, could you talk to that a little bit? about why should someone consider investing now versus 5 years from now or 7 years from now?
Yeah, well, it really comes down to the federal status of the law. And most of your big players, Wall Street, private equity, they can't get involved in the space right now because of the federal legalization and the banking difficulties that they have. So for the private investor with private capital, you're really in the driver's seat. For one of the first times in history, you're in the driver's seat with these investments. And if you want to wait until it becomes federally legal, you're then immediately going to be competing with Wall Street and private equity, and they're billions and billions of dollars. And trust me, they will get the investments before you do. They will get the best deals before you do. So now is the time, before they're able to come and invest in these operations. Now is the time to get involved. Like Kevin says, you want to be early.
Yeah. Here's a simple private investor's tip from my book that is out and expanding. With private placement investments, if you get your 100,000 or your million, whatever the dollar amount that you've identified is an appropriate amount for you to have in a high risk sector, when you bring that dollar to the table, if there's tons of other investors around swarming, trying to get into that deal, I got to tell you something, you're not going to get the best price.
Right.
But when you're at that table, and it is a compelling opportunity, but a lot of investors are like, it's federally illegal, I'm not going to touch that right now. Oh, my neighbor might think ill of me. Mm-hmm. When there's not a lot of money chasing hot deals, that's when you get amazing terms. And that's what our job is, by the way, for our investors, is to structure those amazing deal terms early stage, both for ourselves, the operators, and the investors. See, this is all about creating a win-win for all the parties. If any one of those parties lose on a deal, long term, it's not going to be successful, right? We like long-term win-win investment opportunities.
Right. Absolutely. I think for any CEOs listening, they can probably relate to that with a gut feeling of just like when they've done their best deals, it was because they could add value to the other party. Sure. And so Cannapreneur can add value. It's not just a source of dumb money or just money that's not going to have an effect. Like last year, I was the number 2 investor in a fintech company, and I got in at $1 million valuation. 6 weeks later, the final investor came in at a $10 million valuation. And Kevin's done deals before where by getting in early and then you add that strategic value, just like Oprah Winfrey doing a deal with Weight Watchers. Like they gave her the deal, or a deal with Warren Buffett with a big oil company. They give them the deals, like Kevin Harrington, they get to see deals first, exclusively, on the best terms, because they can add the most value. It's not just the money. Kevin can take you somewhere you wouldn't go otherwise, right?
Yeah, great point, Richard. Great point, because early stage businesses, they're naturally inefficient, right? So if I can land a 7-figure investor, and I know they can help me with branding, resources, contact, get on the public markets, oh man, I'm killing 8 birds with 1 stone here. I'm gonna go after that.
I think the key thing, we mentioned it earlier, is deal flow. There's so much deal flow, 50 a week, 100 a week, 150 a week together. We're looking at a lot of things. We don't have to invest in any, but we pick the winning ones at the end of the day that make sense, and that gives us a bird's eye seat in the marketplace.
Right, for sure. And I think many times when you go to a negotiation with the CEO, they might not have a background as a wealth advisor or scaling a company or running an investor club. And we came into a deal recently where somebody was giving away 33% equity on a deal. We're able to help them restructure it so they only give away 10% equity and they get the same amount of capital in. And you can add that type of value to a cannabis company. Like now, your terms, even though they're really great terms for you, you just save them 23% of their equity stack. You're going to get that deal done and have that great case study.
Absolutely. Well, it's kind of like what Todd did. When he bought into shares for Cannapreneur Partners, he found out, well, geez, your largest investor wrote this size check. Okay, well, if I can come to the table with one that's 3x that, can I get something a little better from my investors, right? That's called a win-win, right? And that's, the early stage, private investing space, that's what makes this exciting, right? Maybe it's the Asian in me and the bartering and the culture, I don't know. But I will tell you that that's what makes this really, really exciting. Sure. In the publicly traded world, you're not gonna call up IBM and say, hey, can I get your shares at a 50% discount? It just doesn't happen like that.
Right. I think almost all ultra wealthy investors want to feel like every dollar they put in is structured very efficiently. It's a very smart, strategic investment. And we always tell people, if it feels like you're throwing darts, then just stop playing that game. You're at the wrong game table. You should only do things which are hyper strategic, and you might want some sleep at night hard assets that produce income. They can't get messed up. Otherwise, everything better be done in a strategic way. Going to a random angel investor club and hearing random pitches and making random investments is the last thing that any American high net worth should be doing, honestly.
Currently, there is no national market for cannabis. That makes every state in which cannabis is legal its own market, and every newly legal state an emerging market. Wall Street, banks, and PE firms are inhibited from investing in the sector due to federal law, and this gives private investors a massive opportunity to get in on the ground floor. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to grasp what will happen to prices and the value of assets once universal legalization comes. Aside from the potential financial benefits of investing in cannabis, there are massive benefits for society. According to the CDC, when adult use cannabis is legalized in a state, prescription opioid and illicit deaths decline by 20%. Alcohol and related crimes decline, and prescriptions for pain, anxiety, PTSD, sleep disorders, and depression all decline. Simply put, people are able to substitute a plant for highly addictive prescription medications that come with unwanted side effects and get the same medicinal benefits. Now is the time to invest. Put Cannapreneur's expertise, experience, and infrastructure to work for you. Contact us for more information. Thank you.
So in terms of last comments and final comments, I wanted to hear for sure, Michael, why you're even putting energy into this space. You can put your energy in many different things. And then I want to go down the line and maybe just get last comments from each of you.
Sure. So in 2016, I'd reached a point entrepreneurially where I was able to take a sabbatical. I had leaders and entrepreneurs in the various businesses that I'd helped launch, and I was really looking for what was going to be the most explosive sector. Found it in cannabis. However, at the end of that year, I was not sure exactly how it was connected to kind of my purpose of kind of, making a bigger or more profound impact on society.
Right.
Well, through the impact that I saw cannabis had on my own mother as it relates to PTSD, once that happened in December of that year, it was undeniable my conviction on cannabis as a medicine and the impact it would make. So now my focus with this industry is I think of the cannabis industry as a great way for me to help investors create wealth, help these early stage entrepreneurs, but also it's part of a big picture plan that I have to build a philanthropic business model to help give back to society. But I see an amazing opportunity here on this East Coast to really capitalize in both the giving back as well as creating immense investor wealth.
Sure. Great.
Yeah.
Tom?
So when I looked at the space, it came down to, for me, looking at it, that there was so much misinformation out there about this plant, that so many things that people think are just wrong, and the benefits that people derive from it that aren't being talked about, that aren't being discussed, that are being shunned by certain political people and even members of the medical community. I just needed a way to get this information out there, because once people realized that, aside from the wealth creation, the number of people who can be helped, just even taking a little gummy at night help you sleep at night instead of having a couple drinks. I mean, that's a huge health improvement for people.
Right.
And the number of people that could benefit from this, I think, is in the tens of millions. And,
Right.
and they're just not, because of what they've been told. So it's getting the information out there and being involved in kind of spreading the word of the benefits of it was really what drove me into the space.
Sure.
Not to mention just the entrepreneurial impact as it relates to job creation.
Oh, yeah.
Right now, Todd, correct me if I'm wrong, I think cannabis is the #1 job creator in the U.S. right now.
In the U.S., it's #1 in Mass.
In
by
Massachusetts by far.
Right.
But we're seeing a lot of not just wealth, but just a creation from the ground up
They're
of
higher
jobs.
paying jobs.
Absolutely.
It's a more diversified industry as far as females and minorities. I mean, it's got everything you want in a new industry right now.
Right.
It checks off every box.
Right. And I think Warren Buffett said that short term, stock market's a voting machine, but long term, it's a weighing machine.
Absolutely.
And what you said, Todd, is basically about arbitrage, and all of investing in some form is arbitraging.
Yep.
Like the billions in revenue you've done, Kevin, in the fitness industry alone. But you got there early, tested out some fitness products, and really expanded that. With any type of investing, the arbitrage closes the more that money floods into there, and the herd is going towards something.
Yep.
And the herd is always thought of as the dumb money when you talk about the herd in the investment industry. Right. And so there's different ways you could attempt an arbitrage that could go bad or could go well. Obviously, we're trying to do a good job arbitraging, finding the right CEO, going to dispensaries, focusing on the East Coast, getting great deal terms. But it all comes down to executing an efficient arbitrage on people waiting on federal legalization status, on 33 states being legal now. And the revenues I know in the space have doubled in the past 4 years, and they're aiming to double again in the next 4 years, is what all the statistics are saying. Any last comments from you, Kevin?
Yeah. So I mentioned I keynoted a cannabis conference a few years ago. It was a $7 billion industry then. Fast forward, it's $15 billion today. Now, I didn't jump in that interim time, and I heard something in my head, but wait, there's more, okay? And so it's gonna be a $30 billion industry, right? Yeah. This is a $30 billion industry by 2024. Now is the time, and that's why I jumped in. I didn't have the big growth from 7 to 15, but 15 to 30 is going to be the massive growth that's going to hit this industry. So again, I like to be in on the ground floor as an investor, as a shark, and these guys have created an amazing opportunity for many people. So that's why I'm here.
Right, for sure. Yeah, and Todd, you have another comment?
Yeah, to Kevin's point, I mean, the cannabis space is not a national market, right? It's 50 individual markets. So while Kevin says he missed the 0 to 7, he's still involved on the ground floor in Massachusetts. When New York State opens, Kevin Harrington will be involved in the ground floor in Massachusetts and Florida. So there's still plenty of opportunity to get in on the ground floor, but you have to beat federal legalization.
Right.
You have to be ahead of that.
In 13 years running the family office club, I've just seen that arbitrage is always a consistency. Also, finding the right way to approach a new space. People saw the opportunity zone law come across. There was a big rush into that space. Same with blockchain. And you may decide not to go into a space at all, but if you are going to go into a space, why would you not at least look at the optionality you have with a deal platform where you can say yes or no to deals just by having a conversation with you guys? It doesn't mean that you have to allocate some blind pool, old school structured fund where you cross your fingers and say, oh, I hope they invest in good stuff. They said they would. But now if they don't invest in good stuff, they have to give back that money after 2 years. That's not a modern model that family offices really like in most cases. And so even if for some reason you decide not to invest in cannabis, finding a Cannapreneur type company for any new niche you're looking at where there's a credible team with a real track record or background, you don't have to invest in a blind fund. You can say yes or no to deals. They're seeing hundreds and hundreds of deals where unless you said, I'm going to dedicate my life to getting cannabis deal flow, you're not going to get the deal flow that Cannapreneur gets by spending 7 figures a year on getting good deal flow. And if you did spend that 7 figures, you'd have an overlap of 25% on deal flow. You'd still just see different deal flow, and one of their deals might be different or better maybe than what you're seeing. So those are some things I've seen over time and why I'm excited to be involved with Cannapreneur. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation. If you want to check out more on Cannapreneur, you can go to the Cannapreneur Partners website and we can set up a conversation with the team to answer any of the questions you have directly. Thank you.
Now is the time to invest. Put Cannapreneur Partners' expertise, experience, and infrastructure to work for you. Contact us for more information.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Todd, Michael, I know that you are on the other line. What I would love to do now is go through some of the questions that came in while the presentation was going on. So, guys, let's get us going.
So, thank you. We have a couple questions we want to get into here and answer right away. Let's go back to the top here. Ed wants to know what happens if cannabis is never federally legalized. Anything like that is a possibility, but I don't think there's been a time in U.S. legislative history when over 70% of the public has wanted something to happen where it eventually hasn't. You can go back to, if you go back to civil rights movement, you go back to same-sex marriage and other issues like that. When the general public is over 70% accepted and wanting something to happen, it typically happens. So what if it never is federally legalized? We don't anticipate much of a change to our way we operate. We would still go state by state. The same dynamics that exist now would exist, whereas it'd be very prohibitive for large investment firms and Wall Street to invest in cannabis, and it'd be up to the small local investor, an individual investor who would actually have the advantage in this space.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I think that's where a lot of the bet is on the cannabis game. So if you think about it,
If federal legalization is coming, those getting in early that get into the right investments are going to be turbocharged by the massive investors behind it. So Ed, your second question, I would say yes. In my opinion, it is a speed to market play because what's happening is on a state by state basis, each ecosystem from the ground up has private businesses growing, right? And so those aren't available in the publicly traded exchanges or any of the major ones in the U.S. today. So the idea is that we're actually doing the road work. We're finding these amazing investment opportunities. We're deploying the capital in, and we want to deploy a lot of capital. In fact, we want to have capital in 108 dispensaries over 5 years, because the belief is as we capitalize these businesses, they become amazingly attractive assets after federal legalization hits. So it poses the question, though, is federal legalization really coming? I think it is, and I'll tell you why. When you look at on the legal cannabis game worldwide, the single entity, in my opinion, that benefits the most from the cannabis industry financially, it's our federal government. I mean, they actually charge a tax premium to the tune of 40% with a tax code called 280E. So, so if you think about that, they're kind of speaking out of both sides of the mouth, speaking of the federal government, right? So we do see federal legalization coming. For them to turn it back and try to put the genie back in the bottle, what we're talking about, 32 to 34 states now have some form of cannabis legalization law in place supporting cannabis. So I think that's a very tough challenge to do. Um, so.
So Sarah asked a couple of questions. She asked, where can I find descriptions of available deals? And then she asked, can I just invest directly into Cannapreneur Partners? The answer to both of those questions is that we do have some deals on our website, and if you email us directly, you can email me directly, Todd Sullivan at Cannapreneur Partners, or Michael Scott at Cannapreneur Partners. We can happy to have a conversation with you. And yes, you can invest in Cannapreneur Partners. We have about $500,000 left on our raise. That's it. Based on the current run rate, that'll probably last 48 weeks before they're all gone. And again, simply reach out to either Michael or myself. We'll be happy to set up a call with you immediately, answer any questions you have, talk about any deal flow that we have, and hopefully bring you aboard.
And that was a $5 million round. So $4.5 million of shares have been purchased by other investors. And, we saw a bit of an uptick after Kevin Harrington invested. So, we do feel positive that the other shares will be moving soon. But in terms of looking at direct deals, my advice would be, get in touch with us, because on a weekly basis, Todd and I see a lot of deals. And in a given week, we might find, a deal that looks great that we really start to invest time and energy into. And if, you're one of the investors that happens to be on this webinar, you contact us. Sometimes with private investing, it's all about timing. It could be a week where we're in the middle of an amazing cannabis deal structuring negotiation, and that can turn into an amazing investment for you to go directly into. Also, speaking about direct deals, we'll do them directly into real estate, directly into the actual enterprise of the business. Part of what we like to do with investors is understand what are your investor goals, your liquidity needs, your investment targets, and then really try to customize and bring those deals to you, in an effort to just save time and efficiency. We only invest in East Coast companies. So that's a question from Chris. I would say we pretty heavily are focused in East Coast companies. We are an emerging markets play, so we look at cannabis from an emerging markets perspective. It's really emerging on the East Coast. So is it exclusive? No. If we see an opportunity in other parts of the U.S. or the world that fits our investment thesis, we'll take a look at it, because it's really tough to find the 1% operators that are really the outliers operationally. So, but we do think the East Coast is where it's at, because in the private game, the earlier you get in, as long as it's the right company, that's how you buy shares at a cheaper price, right? Because at the early days, it doesn't have a lot of cash flow to actually sell at a higher valuation.
And it comes down to actual expected return.
I mean, right now, the East Coast, specifically Massachusetts, the expected rates of return on dollar for dollar on your investment in cannabis, we think the East Coast trumps every other place right now. So, and yes, there was another question from Chris about investors from states um, where it's not legal to invest. Yes, you can invest in cannabis from any state in the U.S. We have investors from the U.S., from Canada, from the islands. So you are absolutely allowed to invest in cannabis, no matter where you live, in the U.S. anyway. Ed wants to know, how do you vet the entrepreneurs you work with? So we have a pretty extensive vetting process. We'll do CSI checks, IRS checks. If someone wants to come in and show us how great their businesses have been doing, we'll ask for tax returns to actually vet that the business and them as an entrepreneur are producing what they say they're producing. We'll talk with former workers, business associates. We'll actually go visit some of the businesses. So our due diligence process is pretty extensive, in that we don't look at it as simply an investment where we place capital. We look at it as a partnership, just like as we do with our investors, right? We're just not taking your money and say, okay, we'll talk to you in a year. It's a partnership. And with our companies we invest in, it's a partnership because we can bring strategy, we can bring resources, we can bring connections to other companies that we own in this virtuous ecosystem, the synergistic ecosystem that we are creating. Whereas, you could come on board of this and we do a deal with you. We're bringing all these resources to you. We're bringing Kevin Herrings into you. So that's really how we look at it. So will cryptocurrency be accepted as monetary payment in deals?
It's funny. I've been asked that probably, I don't know, 10 times over the last 3 years.
Yeah.
So there's got to be something to it. It does seem like the whole crypto world's not going away anytime soon. I mean, right now, today, I wouldn't say we're set up for that. I don't know enough about that industry and how that actually converts to cash. So the answer would be no, but it does seem to be an emerging sector. And also coincidentally, I find a lot of crypto investors also happen to like cannabis investing as well. One other comment in reference to how we vet entrepreneurs. One of the things that I wrote about in my book that's out there available for people is that we're really, I'm big on vetting for emotional intelligence. I find a lot of our peers, competitors will miss that. And it can be easy to focus on things like school, what college you went to, IQ, etc. But the reality is, to make it in the cannabis game, it is an extremely challenging environment with both the regulatory pressures, the uncertainties out there, and the stigma. So it's really an industry that requires extreme tenacity. And so that's kind of our rationale for digging deep on behavioral, kind of behaviors / specifically emotional intelligence. Exits. So, we've been in the industry for 4 short years here in the East Coast. So no formal exits yet. We have had a couple of really close exits. But the reality is, on the East Coast, you got to figure the adult use game really just started over the last couple, 2-3 years. So there hasn't been a lot of big exits from this side of the country in cannabis. But one of the first deals that we did get involved in through a sister holdco, we actually received 9-figure offers from some of the biggest players around the world. We actually had 2 offers, both in the 9 figures, one of which, believe it or not, was pre-revenue. It actually went pretty far into the conversations before we decided to go a different direction. We've actually done that a couple times with some of the big operators because we felt, there's selling at the price we are now, but once that business is fully operational, all the stores are intact, all the wholesale is cranking. We just knew it was going to be worth a lot more. So I can't say yes on an exit. I can say very, very close, but we're excited about what's to come in the future.
Fantastic. Thanks, gentlemen. We're right at the bottom of the hour, so I think we should just end it here. Respect everyone's time. But how can we get in touch with you if we have additional questions?
Simplest way is to email Mike or I, Todd Sullivan at Cannapreneur Partners, Michael Scott at Cannapreneur Partners, or invest@cannapreneurpartners.com. either one of those emails will get to one of us, and we will reach out immediately and schedule a time to have a one-on-one conversation and answer any further questions you have.
And a tiny fine tune to that. You can certainly email me, but if you email Todd, you'll get a response with me. It's not really my strength, but here I'll give you guys another access point for me. Is feel free to shoot me a text. I'm a texter. I do a lot of my business via text. So 508-414-2177 is my cell. I'd be happy to talk to you about what types of investments you're looking for, and I'll be pretty candid, straight with you if those are the investments that we have available. And I also like to inquire about what your liquidity needs are, target rates of returns, things of that nature, just overall goals with your investments. So we welcome any of those conversations.
Perfect. And one last parting thought or note from my end is that everyone's going to receive a recording of today's webinar as soon as it gets processed by our backend system over here. So that should be within the hour. So if you want to watch it again, if you want to share it, by all means, you'll have access to do that right afterwards. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We certainly appreciate your time, and we hope to hear back from every single one of you. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you very much.